Hello, Brobs. We're back with Shakespeare's Sweet Art. I think it's chapter 15, maybe 14. I think it's 15. 16. Wrong again. Wrong again. Chapter 16. You don't hold the camera steady enough. Too bad. Get your own book. What the heck does this say? Take, oh take, choose lips away. Is that what that says? Take, oh take. Unless it says cake. What does that say? I'm guessing take, oh take those lips away. I found Will asleep when I returned that night, and the next morning he did not mention the Countess, nor did I. In a few days we were both busy with thoughts of the coming performance at the palace. The command had indeed been sent by Her Majesty that our company should play Romeo and Juliet before her, and Will was like a boy in his delight. Master Johnson and Master Burbage shared his pleasure with unselfish joy, and indeed all the company seemed glad that their comrade had such an honor bestowed upon him. The only drawback was Will's bodily condition, but that improved steadily from the time the Queen's command arrived and the doctor gave it as his opinion that Will would be fully able to play by Michaelmas. So as soon as possible, he and I were once more rehearsing our old familiar parts as lovers. The first time Will left his room, he went with Count William to the prison and ordered Marlowe's release. What was said at that time I never knew, but thenceforth Marlowe treated Will with a dog-like fidelity and devotion touching to see, and singular in one of his haughty carriage and careless manners. Robin Green and Jack Falstaff had not yet been heard of. They seemed to have buried themselves in the earth. During those weeks I never saw the Countess. She was faithful to our compact, and Will did not speak of her. I wondered a little at this, but finally concluded that the excitements of the preparation for the palace had driven her temporarily from his mind. To me she seemed like a nightmare, one that had tormented me in the past, that would come again, but which now was not. I tried to forget her until Michaelmas. The miniature had disappeared. I never saw it on Will's person, and I thought he must have it hidden among some secret treasures. I tormented myself for a while with conjectures about this, but finally dismissed them with a shrug. At Michaelmas, if my plan prospered, all would become clear. And at length September, cool and beautiful, came, passed, was nearly ended. The feast of St. Michael and all angels dawned, and with it the thought of my revenge. As I finished dressing that morning, I saw, slipped under my door, a small flat package secured by a crimson ribbon. Inside was a lock of lustreless raven hair tied with a blood-colored love knot. 'Twas at once a token and a reminder, as I knew well. Had there been a fire at hand, I would have burned the accursed thing. I dared not leave it lying in my room. I thrust it into my bosom with loathing. We were to be at the theater at noon. The day before I had begged Count William and Will to meet me at the entrance to Paul's at 10. They had marveled at my request, and Will had demurred slightly, since it would be a busy morning for him. At length, however, when I said the matter was urgent, they consented, and so everything pointed to a successful consummation of my plans. I broke my fast, but frugally, that morning. I was filled with alternate dread and triumph. Soon would come the hour for my revenge. Then Marlowe indeed had stabbed Will's body, but I would kill his heart. Alack, in what a coil was I involved. Natheless, I could not bear my anguish longer. I could not. And starting up with the thought, I threw down a coin to pay for the food I had eaten, and rushed away to fulfill my appointment. It was just 10 as I neared Paul's, and prompt as I was, the Countess had reached there before me. I noted with relief that neither Count William nor Will was with her. I did not desire that they should come too soon. When she saw me, she stretched out her hands to me, regardless of the numerous passers-by. Paul's is a busy place, and its nave is the fashionable promenade. We were quite near the entrance. Cesario, she cried in a joyous undertone. At last, didst receive my token? Is all arranged? Ay, madam, I said, truthfully, although I had engaged no priest, which was what she meant. Ay, madam, but we must wait a little. I have invited 2 friends as witnesses. I turned to look for them, and the words I had been about to speak remained unuttered. I saw Will and the Count approaching. Her gaze followed mine. She caught her breath inward with a sharp sound and looked at me piercingly, piteously. For a moment, I was sorry for her. There was an instant's silence. What means this? She said at length in a quick, incisive whisper. What means this? It means, madam, I answered, that the comedy is near its close. I caught her hand and held it, despite her wild effort to withdraw it. Let me go, she cried, although still in a low tone. Art mad, Cesario? No, madam, I said, and I caught her other hand, thus making her my prisoner. I am not mad now, although I have been, and may be. Natheless, I hope my remedy is near. And thus we stood until the Count and Will reached us. What unwilling fair one hast thou there, Cesario? Called Will, his face alight with mischief. The Countess had averted her face, and he did not recognize her at once. Count William opened his lips to fling a gay gibe at me, but closed them with the jest unuttered. Will gave a sharp exclamation. The Countess had raised her head and looked at them. For a moment no one spoke. Then Will turned to me. Explain, he said, and his voice was cold with contempt. Thou broughtst us hither, sir. Explain. I had been trembling, but at his challenge I grew suddenly calm and collected. My all was placed upon this throw. Surely no explanation is needed, I said. The Countess, I indicated her by a slight gesture. The Countess has done me the honor of promising to be my bride. I have summoned you as witnesses. Count William was very white. He uttered a fierce oath at my words and started towards me. Will's hands restrained him. Peace, friend, he said gently. We are in a crowd. Make no demonstration here. Then to me once more, coldly, when was all this arranged? A month ago, I answered airily. A month ago we agreed to go to church today, and I drew out from my bosom the raven lock of hair tied with the crimson love knot. Let me go, said the Count, fiercely, struggling beneath Will's restraining hand, and turning blazing eyes on me as he saw the trifle in my hand. Let me choke the lie in his throat, the accursed soft-spoken traitor. Nay, cried the Countess, wrenching herself free from me and standing erect. Nay, thou shalt not blame him. I loved him at first sight. I made him woo me. Thou shalt not punish him. Thou shalt not. There was something noble in her supreme self-surrender. Again I felt a pang of pity for her. Will glanced around him at the gathering crowd. It struck me for the first time that he was curiously calm. Let us go to a more retired place, he said to the Count. No, replied the latter furiously. I will punish him here and now for his insolence and treachery. I put my arm around the Countess. You refuse to act as witnesses, then, I said, and smiled at her tenderly. At the look, the caress, Count William's self-control gave way. He flung off Will's hands as if it were a feather and whipped out his rapier. Thy sword, he gasped. Thy sword, fellow. Ah, thou hast none. Thine friend, prithee. Courteously, to one of the bystanders, it was proffered him instantly. He drew it out of its sheath with a lightning flash of steel and struck the Countess's love token from out my hand. Here, thou low-born milksop, he cried, tendering the borrowed weapon to me. I will soil my hands by killing thee, and so leave in the world one whining Judas less. I turned white. Here was a development of which I had not dreamed. I had a true woman's horror of swords, and knew naught about fencing. Sooth, I would die bravely, gladly, but not in this fashion. I looked about me desperately for means of escape. The Count saw my shudder and my pallor, and laughed derisively. A brave lover, he said. The mere look of a sword makes him chalk white. See how he dangles it in his hand? What? Must I kill thee without the pretence of a duel? So be it then. He lifted his rapier. End it quickly, Count. The crowd grows, said Will, glancing about him. The Countess uttered a piercing scream and held out her hands beseechingly to the crowd that now hemmed us in, calling for help. The sympathy of the people was against us, however, for the cause of the quarrel had been whispered from one to another. Not even thy tears shall save him, Countess, cried Count William furiously. Come, fellow, lift thy point. Thou hast played with two hearts, madam. 'Tis fitting that thine own should break. I lifted the weapon I held in gingerly fashion, and the crowd roared with laughter. The Countess sobbed. Will looked at me with a smile of contempt. A mist rose before my eyes. The Count lunged at me furiously. His point barely missed my heart. With the narrow escape, such courage as I had suddenly deserted me. I forgot my disguise, remembered nothing save the present. I was all woman again. I began to sob, and dropping the sword, ran forward and fell at Will's feet, embracing his knees, in an agony of terror. "Oh, Will," I cried, "Will, save me! Oh, Will, be not so cruel to me!" There was another great burst of laughter from the crowd, echoed derisively by the Count. But Will did not share in their mirth. He looked down at me, amazement and contempt struggling for the mastery in his expression. Then suddenly his countenance changed. He bent towards me and gazed searchingly into my eyes. Then recognition flashed into his face. He lifted me suddenly, drew me to his heart, and laid my tear-stained countenance upon his breast. "Nan," he whispered in my ear, "Nan, dear Nan, my sweetheart and my wife." Is that it? That's the end of the chapter. Wow. I did want to highlight the roses at the bottom. Very nice. Focus. There we are. There we are. All right, this story gets better. How many pages are left? Let's take a look. 231. What's the end? Don't look at that. 50 more pages. All right, Bobs. That's all. Goodbye. Goodbye.